every laugh, every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste, the therapist. Let's go.
All right. Hello, beautiful people. If you are watching me on the replay, thank you so much for watching me. My name is Celeste. I am a therapist from Boston. And my goal is to just help you kind of shift the way you think. I have a podcast that I started in 2018 called Celeste the Therapist Podcast. And what I've been doing is talking to people that are doing things to empower other people by kind of sharing their story and hearing about what they do. But since COVID started and the quarantine started, I decided to create a video podcast. So I'm essentially doing the same thing that I was already doing with the podcast, but just bringing it to people via video so that people can have real time access to kind of the material that I deliver. So before we get started, so every Monday through Friday, we always have a special guest who is giving us some really dope, amazing insight. But before we get started, I just kind of wanted to show you guys this crisis text line 741-741, and it is a line that is free to use right now. With this time period is a period that nobody's ever experienced, and I know that it brings up a lot of emotions, a lot of different things. So I am a therapist, so I hear about these things all the time, and I know everyone does not have access to mental health care. And so I really want people to be mindful of what they're experiencing. One of the things that I've been trying to talk to people about doing is thinking about what's within their control. And when we think about what's within our control, like our sleep, the foods we eat, and like moving our body, there's so many things happening right now that's not within our control that makes it really hard for us to cope. And so I really want people to kind of be mindful of being able to do some things within their control. So I'm going to bring on my special guest. She's super dope. She also has a podcast that I would love for you guys to check out. Her name is Tiana. I think I hope I pronounced it right. I actually should have asked you. I said it right? Oh, I'm like the worst. I am the absolute worst at pronouncing names. So
it's okay. You got it right the first time. A lot of people butcher it, surprisingly.
Oh, I feel so good. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, so I am Tiana Renae. I am the host of the Cope for the Culture podcast, which is a podcast geared towards raising awareness and breaking down the stigmas related to mental health in Black and Brown communities. I'm also the founder of my nonprofit, Healthy Pleasures, Inc., which is also aimed towards the same things, breaking down those barriers, raising awareness, helping people learn how to take better care of themselves, and just prioritizing their mental health.
So not only are you the host of the podcast and you started this nonprofit, what do you do by trade?
By trade, like full-time?
Yeah, you are
full-time. I am a trauma therapist.
You're a therapist. Okay. So she's a therapist, which makes sense why mental health is super important to you. First, I kind of want to talk about healthy pleasures and like how did that get started? Like what does that mean and how did that come up for you?
So Healthy Pleasures actually started as a blog for me when I was in grad school. I was working out hardcore around that time, really prioritizing my body and making sure that I felt good all around. And so hence Healthy Pleasures came. But I stopped doing the blog for a little bit and it actually showed up in one of my memories. I think it was on Facebook. And I was like, why did I stop doing this? And so I restarted it and incorporated more than just like working out. And made it more about self-care, taking care of yourself as a person, prioritizing your mind, body, and spirit. And so that's where Healthy Pleasures came from, the nonprofit. And I made it to just make break the stigma. We know there's so much around mental health and how people feel and the way that it's viewed in our community specifically. And so I really just wanted to provide a platform and a voice for people and to normalize that experience. And so that's where Healthy Pleasures came from.
Did you ever feel that? Oh, sorry, I don't know if that's audio. Can you hear me good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you ever feel the stigma growing up around mental health? Like, is that something for me personally? Like, that's something that I felt like existed. It wasn't a regular thing we talked about, which is why I'm big on breaking the stigma. Was that something for you as well?
Definitely. I will say that the more that I went through like undergrad and started taking the classes that I was taking and learning the information that I had is more so when it switched for me. So like I got the basic things from growing up, but we know that mental health was not something that was really always pushed to the forefront and to be prioritized. And so I actually wanted to be a doctor first, to be honest, because I wanted to help people. But my advisor at the time told me basically that it was very competitive and I needed to make a decision because I wasn't doing well in science. And so I transitioned over into a different major, and that's where the therapist Tiana came from.
Nice.
Yes.
When you think about now with COVID and you deal with trauma and and you understand the importance of mental health, what do you see happening for people now as they're kind of quarantined in their homes?
Really, people are just trying to adjust, I think, is the biggest way that I can put it. I know a lot of the conversations that I'm having now, whereas my specialty before was on a specific identified trauma that happened previously, whereas now we're all thrown into COVID, which is also has the potential to be a traumatic event for people. And so instead of us doing the work that we were doing before, a lot of the focus is going on to helping people maintain and provide structure for themselves so that they can get through this process, because none of us have been through this before. And so there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of people feeling isolated because there are a lot of people by themselves. And so really we've just been trying to help safety plan as much as possible, because when people are stuck in the house, such as now, rates of abuse go up, rates of violence go up within the home, domestic violence. And so just really prioritizing everybody's safety and making sure that everybody has a plan to kind of get through this the best way we know how. And so that's really what I've seen, is just the adjustment has been a big thing for people.
What does that look like for you, kind of being on the front lines of hearing about this stuff, especially the domestic violence rates and all the other things that are happening? Like, I'm hearing it firsthand, and personally for me, it's a lot being thrown at me at one time. It's like I signed up for this, but I didn't sign up for COVID. And I think the level of coping strategies that I would usually normalize is no longer available. So I'm even having to adjust my delivery. And sometimes I'm just listening. Like, there's nothing I can say about like how they're feeling. Like, how does that look like for you as a therapist right now?
To be honest, it is a situation for me too, where I decided to be a trauma therapist. I did not decide to be a trauma therapist during COVID. So it has been a big adjustment, because just like my clients and the people that we serve and work with are trapped in the house, so am I. So I'm trying to navigate and help them walk through the process. But there are days like today where it's been rough for me, but I'm still having to provide that psychological safety for people and helping them get to a point where they feel comfortable, at least for the day, to get to the next day. So I will say it's been both rewarding and challenging for me to kind of manage both cups.
What would you say to people that are home? Because when you talked about the blog that you started, it was about managing like your mindset and moving your body and these healthy pleasures. And those are the kind of things I try to get people to understand. As small as it may seem, it actually can help stimulate us a little bit. I just reposted something that said, If you're feeling depression, just get up. If you start to feel it, get up, move your body, dance, do something. And I think this type of language I didn't grow up hearing. It was more so what you said about like we feeding you, you got clothes on your body.
Yeah.
So what kind of things would you tell to people that might be home with limited things to utilize and may not even have access to a therapist?
I know that there are a lot of people, and I actually need to look up more. We've been throwing resources back and forth at work to try to see what's available. But I know like in different states, there are being pro bono services offered for people, whether that's through groups or just doing telehealth individual sessions. So that's definitely something for people. And I think the biggest thing and what we have been and what I have been trying to push mostly is trying to maintain as much structure and routine as possible, which is very difficult to do when you literally just go from your bedroom in the morning to the living room, to the living room, to the kitchen, and it's just the same thing over and over again. So trying to create a routine, have days where you're not wearing just lounge clothes. Like I had to start forcing myself to get up and put clothes on, as much as I would love to just chill and wear sweatpants and leggings all day and just be in the house because I'm in the house. It doesn't help as far as trying to stay grounded and stable within this, because it's just the same thing over and over every day. So definitely maintain some kind of structure, have a time where you go outside. Like outside has probably been a really big saving grace for me. I've battled snakes and everything out there like within the past 2 weeks, but just being able to get out of the house and do something where I'm not in the same four walls every day has been helpful for me, at least. So I definitely recommend that. I've worked with some of my clients around like just one small goal that you can do each week that's prioritizing you and yourself. I'm not saying to do all these great extravagant things, but what are you going to do to feel better from Monday to Friday? Okay, now the next Monday to Friday, what's another small thing we can add to that to kind of get back to some normalcy as much as we can, because we don't know what's happening currently.
And Tiana says she talks about snakes because you're in North Carolina, right?
I am in North Carolina, and the snakes have decided to come outside. And so I was met with one last week.
Well, there's not a lot of people around, so I think they're
confused. They are confused.
I want to move into talking about Cope for the Culture, because from my understanding, Healthy Pleasures started first, and then Cope for the Culture derived. It's so interesting too for all of my entrepreneurs. The more that you lean into your craft, the more ideas come from it. So the thing that you were doing with your blog turned into a nonprofit, which turned into a actual podcast. So tell people a little bit about that, because that's super dope to me.
So I actually, when I was running Healthy Pleasures, because I didn't have Cope for the Culture at first, like I had done planners and released things with those names on it. But as far as the podcast, that wasn't something I had ventured into yet, but I wanted to. So for a little bit, it was me making videos weekly on like my Instagram profile for Healthy Pleasures. I had a YouTube channel for a little bit. And so I was doing that, but I didn't have or know what the resources were to get into the podcast world. And so I had a friend from high school who reached out to me about starting a podcast and how did I feel about like spreading the word around mental health. He knew what I was doing in the community. And I was like, well, sure. I don't see no reason why not. So I started that. And I honestly don't know what I thought it was going to look like or how I wanted it to feel, because when I said to myself, oh, I'm going to have a mental health podcast, people aren't going to listen to that. That was the first thing that I said, like, people don't want to hear about that. And so I tried to make it as chill as possible. It's like, I just want to have real conversations with real people and talk about real things that people are going through that we try not to talk about. And so I told my family and friends about it, asked for some people to come on and talk with me, and they obliged. And I said, okay. And so just started throwing different topics out there. And for season 1, it was more of like a experimental, put my foot out there. What is this going to look like? Season 2 feels completely different for me for some reason. I've had a lot of things happen in between season 1 and season 2. And so just my mission, I feel like this season is different, and I want the topics to be more relatable to people and more specific, where people can get the information that they're looking for, to feel like they're not the only one, because a lot of the times we feel like we're the only person going through what we're going through in the world, and that's not always the case. And so I just wanted people to be able to listen from the comfort of their own homes. They don't have to sit and talk to somebody if they don't want to. I know everybody's not into therapy, and I'm not providing therapy on the podcast, but the stuff that we talk about is helpful, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback from people around it. So
do you have any advice? Because I know when I listened to the beginning of season 2, you talked about like you weren't sure if you was gonna keep going with the podcast. So, I think sometimes when we're struggling or when we're alone and we're doing this like entrepreneurial work, it can feel like, who's gonna listen, or why does it matter? And we get in our head. Do you have any like advice for people that might be dealing with that right now, especially given the fact that they're pretty isolated?
I'm the queen of getting into my head, so I understand. But I think something that I've been battling with, because I'm sure you've seen it too, there have been lots of things being pushed around social media around how people have to make all these plans and do all these things to get to the next level and improve themselves and reach their goals. And I'm like, yeah, all of that is great, but also we're in the midst of a pandemic where there are people who were dealing with real life things before this. And now some of those real life things are getting worse because now we're in the midst of a national, global pandemic at this point. And so I think the advice that I would give at this point is just to take your time and take it one day at a time with this thing, because none of us know what's going to happen. I've been trying to tell people, feel how you feel and whatever that feels like, because there's no right or wrong feeling to have right now. Nobody knows what's happening. Not a scientist, not a doctor. Nobody can give us hardcore evidence to say this is how this thing is going to end. So take it one day at a time. If you want to go out and reach your goals and start, like I've used this time for me as a time to get into my craft, because now I have a lot more time to dedicate to it. Yes, I'm working from home, but I also have more space to do that. So that's something that feels comfortable for me. But I think that has to be a person by person case. And that people should just be allotted the time to do what feels right for them in this time. And if that is working on yourself, great. If that is taking the time just to finally get a break, that's cool too. Like whatever feels good to you is what I would say for people right now. And outside of getting in your own head, try not to let other people get in your head too, because there are a lot of things being thrown at people right now and a lot of pressure, I feel.
Pressure into feeling like you have to do something.
Yeah.
There
come out of this pandemic and we haven't accomplished one thing, then we did something wrong. And I'm like, but that's not fair. That's not fair to people. It's a lot of pressure.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, it has really bothered me, and I'm just trying to stay in the background with it. But I would definitely say for people, do what's best for you, because at the end of the day, nobody else has to live your life for you but you. Yeah. And whatever consequences come from that, you're the only person who has to deal with it. So
yeah.
Feel your feelings and chill.
And I tell people, like I'm privileged in being able to still work from home. And a lot of the things that I've been doing, I had already established it. And so I tell people, like, just take it one day at a time, because I think that there's a lot of guilt being put on people. And even with the people I see, I say, like, we are actually in the middle of a pandemic. Like, it's okay. To say you're not okay. It's okay that you have to take a pause. Like, it's okay. Yeah. And I think being kind to yourself is something that we don't do well enough. And so, like, listening to that inner voice is going to be important. And being patient with yourself, I think, is huge.
Yeah. I mean, we're not taught how to be kind to ourselves, if we're being honest. So people struggle with that a lot. I know I'm one of those people, because you just don't know what that looks like. And it takes a lot of maneuvering through life and figuring out what your path is and what that looks like for you. And then deciding, like, what does it look like to be nice to myself and prioritize myself? Like, I have to tell myself I'll say things and I'll say, that was not nice. That was not nice. Why would you say that about yourself? but everybody doesn't have that, and it takes practice. So I
That's
don't
good.
tell people. Yeah.
One thing I like about Tiana is that she's very like she is now. This is how she is on her podcast.
Yeah.
She's extremely real, and I think that having a therapist, not that we're not human, but I think people assume that we don't experience the same things because we're always
Right.
helping people with this stuff. But sometimes I'll be saying stuff to my client. I'd be like, "Yo, Celeste, you need to do the same thing you talk about right now."
Yeah. I'm saying something like, this is really for you, but I'm going to say it out loud so they can get it too. But this message is for you.
So one thing about Tiana's podcast, Cope for the Culture, you literally get the same person that you're hearing now. And I, appreciate your transparency with not just because you're a therapist, but because you're able to say, like, I'm human. I have these flaws. I'm in my head a lot. I think that's, that's one thing. I'm not in my head a lot. And, that's such a huge issue for people. And so, like, being able to, like, recognize that is going to be important. And then also being able to pinpoint the times when you are being negative to yourself is going to be huge.
Yeah.
Can you give my audience just 2 takeaways from today? Just something to hold on to or think about, or anything that you want to say to encourage them?
I would say, and I've been saying this a lot, like, really take it one day at a time. I will be the first person to admit that I'm probably one of the most anxious people around what's happening and in life, period. So I get that feeling of, like, you don't have any control. We don't know what one day looks like from the next. They say this is what's going to happen, but 2 weeks from now, it could be something completely different. So I would just really say, take it one day at a time, prioritize yourself as much as you can. Try to pay attention and listen to your body, because our bodies are going to tell us lots of things during this time. If you're noticing you're having lots of headaches or stomach aches or body aches and things just don't seem what they used to be, that's okay. It's probably stress and anxiety, but pay attention to that and really prioritize your self-care and what that looks like for you. Because what you said earlier, the things that we did before for self-care may not be those same things. So, like, for me, I loved going to the gym before, and I'm like, oh, please, Planet Fitness, just let me back in. So
just give me the key, I'll lock up.
Yeah, but finding, like, alternative things to do, like making a home gym if I need to. So just finding what works for you, feel your feelings, and don't let people make you feel bad for feeling that way during this time. It is absolutely okay. Nobody can take away your experiences and what it feels like for you, because each of us are dealing with something different during this time. And so that would be my main thing.
Yay, I love it. Can you let people know how they can find you?
Yes. So you can find me for the podcast. It is at Cope for the Culture podcast. That is on Instagram. I also have a Twitter for that, which is at Cope, the number 4, the culture. And then for the nonprofit page, you guys can find me. Celeste actually has the website up now at www.healthypleasuresinc.org. And Healthy Pleasures also has an Instagram, which is at Healthy Pleasures Inc. So those are the ways, and I'm on Facebook too for both the podcast and the nonprofit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If you're listening to this if you're listening to the podcast, you guys know you can catch the links to everything that she just mentioned in the show notes. Miss Renae, thank you so much for making space to come on, and your jewels that you dropped. It's a reminder. I really love the body stuff that you said. I have to remember to talk about that when I'm talking about the different things that people are feeling. I feel like our body responds before our, like, logic. Like, I was telling people a couple of weeks ago after this started, I was just like this. I was literally like, my body just felt like this. And I'm just like, okay, like, I feel like I'm okay, but my body's telling me, yo, Celeste, you're not okay.
Something different. Yeah. I mean, once you learn your body and the warning signs, it will freak you out, because you'll notice that a lot of things have been happening for a lifetime for you. And now you're like, oh, I'm just anxious. That's all it means. I'm not really having a heart attack. It just means that I'm anxious. So, like, there are going to be lots of things for people. And so just pay attention to your body. Your body is going to let you know. I think the biggest thing for a lot of people is sleep right now and your schedule. that is probably going to remain inconsistent right now just because there are a lot of unknowns, but try as best as possible to keep yourself on a schedule if you can. And if you don't succeed every day, that's okay. Like,
That's okay.
we're all just trying to make it.
It's
all just trying to make
it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and everything that you're doing. I'm going to say bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was so good. I'm so grateful to her for coming on and dropping so many jewels for us. Again, if you want to follow her, Cope for the Culture, Healthy Pleasures Inc., you can follow her. You can find her podcast streaming everywhere. If you just type in Cope for the Culture, and you'll find that. It's good to like listen to things. You know, a lot of times we don't have a lot of options, especially now. And one thing about me, I start my day with something positive. So something like Cope for the Culture or something like music or meditation, like a song, like I literally start my day like that because it starts to fill my spirit. And now more than ever, I need that. I need my spirit to be filled with something positive because there's so much happening that's not within my control. And I really want to kind of be mindful on what I'm feeding my spirit. So I don't watch the news. I'm not on social media a lot. You know, I silent some text messages. My mom keeps texting me all these updates about what's happening with COVID. Like, you know, there's a lot of different things that are very small, but they are they're me taking care of myself by making sure I'm creating boundaries in that area. So there's a lot of little things you may not initially like recognize it as something that will be helpful. Like, what does me getting on social media have to do with anything? What does me creating a schedule mean? Like, we're still in COVID. Why should I create a schedule? Like those kind of things that, you know, you may be telling yourself now, ask yourself, well, if what I'm doing now isn't working, like, why not just try something different? Like, how is it going to hurt me to like try to embark on this new way that like Tiana was talking about, or that Celeste talks about? Like, how is it going to hurt me, right? And so really thinking about ways that you can start to implement. And I'm talking about small goals. Tiana talks about when she's meeting with her clients, she tells them try to achieve like one small goal a week, you know, like making it small because you're trying to introduce this thing to your body, right? So, and be kind to yourself through the process. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't forget, tomorrow we'll be back 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about something different. Don't forget, you can follow the podcast. You're welcome. You can follow the podcast, Celeste the Therapist Podcast. If you missed any part of this and you want to listen to it, you can listen to it on the podcast. It'll be up tonight, streaming on all podcasting platforms. If anything I ever say resonates for you, understand like you have the power to make the change, but you just have to like start having faith to believe in yourself. And I think when that faith starts to happen, when you start to be like, I can do this, I feel like nobody can take that away from you, right? You just got to keep feeding your spirit. That's how it starts. Love you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow night.
Every laugh, every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste the Therapist. Let's go.